This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
When a career path comes across your radar, it's common to see the end result. What is rarely viewed is the hard work that it takes to get to the finish line. Those that fail may be unwilling to go through the difficulties to get to where they want to be. You become immersed in your profession, especially when you feel the joy of the true meaning of your job. Each day trying to become just a little better, navigating the peaks and valleys, trying to level off. Everything comes to an end, and one day it's all over. You're left out into the wilderness with no waypoints and no compass. You have to figure out what's next and what to draw purpose from. That's a reasonable facsimile to what is gone. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do, and that's the stories we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please comment. Don't forget to ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and follow us on all social media so that way you can find out exactly is what we're doing. And on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome a person who I've spoken to quite a bit. That's Tom Smith, to discuss the suffering of gold shields. Tom had a 30-year career in the NYPD and survived it all. And then when he left, he was left out in the open.
Thank God he survived it. He's sitting here.
Did he survive it? I don't know. So let's welcome Tom Smith to the show. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
And, you know, you've been very generous to us, throwing shout-outs on your show. And listen, I'm all about cross-promotion.
Absolutely.
You know,
he's got the Blue Line Beer Company shirt on. I thought maybe he'd bring us some.
I don't have any more room left for T-shirts right now. So
No, I mean the beer.
Oh, the beer.
You can take the T-shirt. I'll take the beer.
Yeah.
We don't have either. This is it.
Well, that's the way it always works. When somebody brings something in, they'll bring in like we had Mary Sharon from Carlo's Bakery in Hoboken. She brings in all these cakes. I'm gluten free. I can't eat it. It looks so good.
They were good. I couldn't eat it, so I capitalized on that one.
He goes in the room afterwards with our producer, and he says, "You know, Kevin can't eat any of this, right? So this is ours."
Someone's got to eat.
We had cannolis. We had everything. Oh man, that was good.
Let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, but we do trust them. So go to ToyotaHackensack.com. Let them find you a car. They're good guys over there. I just spoke with one of the general sales manager today, and listen. They're doing right by us. We better be doing right by them.
You looking for a new car?
We'll be up for new soon, real soon.
So my father after he crashes it again.
So, Tom, each week we take a question from our audience. Our social media question this week comes from Stasia_LOL. Says, this is a loaded question. I got to be honest with you. This is a tough question. Says, what was your darkest day of your professional life? As a cop, it's not just day, it's days.
Yeah,
there's what do you think it is?
There's a few I'd have to choose from, but I would say back early in my career, one of my best friends and Sergeant Jimmy McNamara committed suicide over an illness that he had, and that hurt. Mac was my boss from the time I was a rookie. He chose me to be on his squad when we got out of kind of our training 6-month regiment and went into steady 4 to 12s. He picked me up. He was a close friend of mine. He was at my wedding. He was at christenings, all that stuff, and tragically took his life, which hurt a lot, you know, and it took a long time to get past having another sergeant to run the squad and run the anti-crime unit other than him, not hearing him on the radio. It took a while. It took a long time to get rid of. And
there's different personalities and everything else too. You know, you got to get used to the new boss and
yep. And Mac was unique. You know, he was a sergeant, but he was a cop that just happened to be a sergeant.
Yeah.
And he was a salt of the earth, cared about cops more than anyone I still to this day ever met.
You know, I always say that's the best supervisors is the guys that are still cops.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and like I said, when I started making it through the ranks, I wasn't a go do this guy, go do that. Let's go do this. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm gonna be right behind you.
Then those
if
are always
if we're kicking in the door, I'm kicking it in with you.
Right. Those are always the best sergeants, the best ones.
Mike, what do you think?
You know, I mean, I had a bunch of them, but you know, Tom brought it up before 9/11. You know, that like I said, I'll never forget. I was working an off-duty. I was working 3 to 11 that day. I was working an off-duty detail in the morning, and it was right down the Meadows, you know, New Jersey Meadowlands, and it overlooks the skyline. So I'm sitting there, and it was bullshit detail where we had to check trucks going into a baler facility, bringing garbage in and whatnot. And I had my portable radio with me, and a guy says, one of the guys from my department says, I'm going to be doing traffic up on the one main road that overlooks the skyline. He said, there's a lot of traffic up here. He goes, I don't know if you heard a plane hit the World Trade Center. Turn around, look over my shoulder, and I could see smoke coming out of the World Trade Center. So we had a TV there, so I put the TV on, I put the news channels on, they're talking about it and everything. So I turn around, and I'm just looking at it. I mean, listen, we're 10 miles away, so the World Trade Center was that big, but I could see the other plane hit the second tower. I called the guy that was running the job. I said, listen, I'm out of here. I got to go. I got to go into work. So I went home, put my uniform on, went into work. Chief gave us all cars, and we went to different hospitals to pick up doctors, and we had to drop them off at Giant Stadium parking lot. So we go to a hospital, pick up a couple doctors, in a marked unit, drop them off. After the first time we dropped someone off, they said, I don't know if there's a need for more doctors. I'm not finding too many bodies. And it was just like, oh.
It's a crime scene, not a recovery.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. There's so many dark days that create this domino effect. Like, and they all affected me different ways, from dead children to suicides to I don't like killing animals. I can tell you right now how much I had to kill a baby fawn that got whacked by a car. And the freaking thing just stopped right before I'm about to pull the trigger, look straight at me. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you've had so much over time, that stuff affects you more and more as time moves on. But I'd have to say my darkest day is the day, and it wasn't even while I was still employed, but I wasn't working. It was the day I was told I had to retire. I didn't have a choice. I didn't go out my way. It wasn't on my terms. But the funny thing about dark days is dark days always make the sun shine brighter. If you had bright sunlight every single day of your life, you're not going to appreciate it as much unless you know the other side of it. You always got to have the back to the front. So that was a tough question. It's a loaded question. We could probably do a whole show.
Do a whole show on that alone.
Just like that, talking about bad affecting calls. But I think what the crux of the question is there those are the times in your professional career when you felt most defeated.
Oh yeah,
I think that's what it is.
Yep.
Or like you said, it reverts back to the social media or the IG Live question. It's almost when you want to quit.
Yeah.
It's almost when you say, "What am I doing this for?"
Yeah, it's a tough day. Stasia, thank you so much for sending that one in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. Now, you and I have had several different conversations. We were introduced by she's just taller than a leprechaun.
Yeah. Is there female leprechauns?
Leprecha? I don't know.
Leprechauness?
Today there is.
You don't know. You can't ask.
This little girl who's just about over, maybe, I don't even think she's over 5 foot.
I'd say
that's Amanda Coleman.
Yay high.
Yeah, she's yay high.
Yay high.
Whose voice will put you to sleep every single time. She should read bedtime stories. But she's a very sweet woman, and through her web of contacts, she's very giving. And listen, that's why we're always willing to promote anything that she puts out.
Let's give her a shout out, Irish Angel,
Amanda Coleman.
She's doing fantastic work. And unbelievable.
And she's coming back to Jersey. You're going to try to get together and
going to wrangle her in again.
Yeah, we're going to try. That white hair, you see it coming from a mile away.
A mile away.
Yeah. So, Tom, I'm a big fan of what you're doing now. I listen to your show, Gold Shield Show. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? I know enough, so I don't need to.
Well, I did the 30 years in the NYPD. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do. My dad was an NYPD detective in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So,
where'd you grow up?
I was born in Inwood, up in Manhattan, Washington Heights, and then grew up basically in Rockland County.
Washington Heights, isn't that where John Sullivan was from?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, John Sullivan. I don't know if that name may have come across your desk once or twice,
or 3 times.
Yeah, he's doing good work now.
Yep. And then my dad retired in 1976. We moved up to Rockland County, but growing up, that's all I wanted to do. I would steal his shield off his dresser when he got home, put on my belt, run around the house, acting like a detective and chasing my sisters around.
Did he have the big mustache with the lamb chops?
No. He was a just like I said before, the biggest Irishman, Irish cop, quintessential one, white hair.
The prototypical
That was it.
Irish New York City.
You know-
Because they were all New York City cops were all Irish back
Oh
in the
yeah,
day.
back then, yep. His hands were pieces of meat, and he was just the best, my best friend, my hero, my mentor, everything to me. And that's what I wanted to be. You know, I've said it on other shows. I've said it to people I've spoken to. Once in our lives, we've always said, I want to be like my dad. And I actually got to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
You lived your life's dream.
Right. I got his shield, you know, when I
that's
got promoted to detective, and his shield number was everything to him. His license plate, the lotto numbers, OTB, everything was 638. So I actually, for his 80th birthday, switched my original detective shield and got his.
That's cool.
That's real cool.
Yeah.
That's I know. That's like a big thing with lineage cops.
Sure, you had to jump through hoops to do that too, didn't you?
You know, it was a funny story. When I first got promoted, I asked if it was available, and it wasn't. And once in a while, you can make a phone call to the guys who have it and explain to them why it's important. And a lot of times they'll give it up, and this guy wouldn't.
Pay a little vig.
Right. He just wouldn't. He just, no, I'm not giving it to you. You know, so he was a great guy. So I actually forgot about it. And later on in my career, I was in JTTF, and one of the guys that I worked with just mentioned it. He goes, hey, did you ever get your dad's shield? So I said, no, I actually didn't. He's like, well, why don't you call and see maybe that guy retired and it's available now? So that's exactly what I did. I called the shield desk down in 1PP, and I got the best woman in the world on the phone. Older lady who's probably been there forever. And I asked her if 638 was available, and she said, well, it's actually retired because we have so many detectives now, we're getting rid of the older numbers. So she says, very politely, can I ask you why? So I said, well, it was my dad's shield. It was his life. It would be so great to have it. She goes, all right, let me tell you what we're going to do. Get the chief to write a 49, which is a request. Have him sign it, bring it down to me. I'll put it back in service for you.
Oh,
That's
cool.
real cool.
Right. So I typed up the fastest
Right
report I
there.
did, ran down to the chief's office, and the chief was cool. You know, told him what it was. He signed it right there. I ran down there. So I get there. She's like, you got here already? Handed it to her, and she had it made in about 2 or 3 days, and I had it. And it just, like I said before, lined up with his 80th birthday. So I actually gave him the 49 as a present.
So what was his reaction when you got that
I was
shield?
going to say he had to be tearing up.
He cried.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Dude,
were
I'm
at-
almost crying listening to it.
Yeah, I mean, we were at a party at my sister's house down in Jersey for his 80th birthday, and no one knew. My wife knew. That was it. I didn't tell my sisters. No one knew what I was doing. So I just hand him an envelope, and everyone's kind of looking, and he starts reading it and starts crying. So my sister's like, what the hell did you do?
Did you tell him you have cancer or something?
And then, right. And then he read it. You know, he got through reading it, and that was it. And then I think I got it the next day.
Now, I want to ask this question because I grew up with some cops' kids. Cops' kids aren't always the moral compasses that you want to follow. Was that you? Or were you always hyper-focused on getting that job?
Hyper focused on getting the job.
Yeah.
I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I played sports. That was it. You know, I played baseball, basketball, and that was my life, and geared towards being a cop. You know,
What
and-
about college? Was college in it?
Well, I went to community college for a year and a half. Played baseball for a year and a half, and then what happened was I took the test in 1987. And thinking, all right out of high school, you know, right around the time I'm 19 and a half, 20 years old, you know, I'll get on. And David Dinkins was the mayor at the time and had 3 years of freezes.
Freezes, yeah.
So we didn't get hired till 1990. But no, the biggest thing with
Should have
myself,
just called Mike Dowd. He would have got you in. But we know, by the way, we know him.
he would have helped out.
Yeah, he would have helped out.
You put him down as a reference, right?
Instead
Oh,
of
did you get that one?
instead of starting at 20 grand, you would have probably started at 120 grand.
120 grand,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And had a pocket load of coke.
Yeah.
And a nice car.
Yeah.
But, you know, the biggest thing, and I have 4 older sisters, and the biggest thing was never to embarrass Dad, because Dad knew everybody. Everyone in the NYPD,
That's
in
good
New
and
York
bad.
City,
Yeah.
right? He knew everyone. So my sisters were older, did their thing, and lived most of their life in the city before we moved. I was 9 when we moved up to Rockland, and my sisters are older than me. And that was the biggest thing. Don't do any, and my sisters never got in trouble because the biggest thing was don't embarrass dad. Because whoever shows up to the scene is going to know who he is. So just don't do that. So we didn't.
And you would probably, back in that time, you would get some grace from whoever showed up, but you almost don't want it because then if you got grace, that means you got a good deal with your old man.
That means the old man was called.
Yeah.
And said, guess what your son did.
Right. And then you got to walk in the house.
Yeah. I tell all the cops in my town.
When they're sitting there in a lounge.
I tell all the cops in my town, you guys better hope you catch him before I do.
Right.
Yeah. That's because that's the way that I grew up. But so you start taking tests what time?
We started taking tests in 87.
Yeah, and then what was it like the first time you got that letter saying, "Hey, you're accepted"?
Oh, it was, we went through the hiring freezes, like I said. So you got crushed a couple of times. There was one time the class got canceled that I was going in the night before we were supposed to start.
Oh, that's tough.
Which at 10 o'clock at night, the phone rings.
Why?
Just budget stuff. We were all set. And this was kind of the maybe second or third time it was canceled. So we're like, okay, this is it. It's tomorrow. And back then, remember, we had 3 different departments.
Yeah.
So you had to get the letter to go down and find out what department you were in. Either transit housing
transit
or the PD,
housing, yeah.
which was more stressful than everything else because you wanted the PD. And the night before that, they canceled the class. So then you don't get jaded, but you get that next letter that, hey, go down, on Thursday, whenever it was. You're like, okay. And you're waiting for the phone to ring, and it didn't. And went down, got the PD. And it was so thrilling because, a lot of times in life, you don't get to live out a dream. You dream of something. A lot of times you don't get to do that. And I was lucky enough to do that.
Like we said, I had 2 dreams of my life. One to be a professional football player. I realized I was too slow and too short. And the other one was to be a cop. And I became a cop. I lived my life's dream.
Yeah. Yep.
Loved every day of it.
Makes it more special.
Yep.
I never, I'm a little bit different. I never had the dream to be a cop. I found being a cop.
Well, you wanted to be a car salesman, didn't you?
Yeah. Actually, no, I wanted to be a teacher. And when I got in,
you did that too.
When I went in and I realized that I really dislike other teachers. I didn't dislike the students. Everybody thinks I left teaching because of the students. No, I left teaching because of the other teachers. But
Backstory behind that is Kevin used to sell cars with my brother 25 years ago.
Yeah, which is originally how I met Mike. Yeah, it's such a small world that the older you get, the smaller the world gets. It seems to be.
Yes.
Because you run into the people. Now, your father's world, by the time he passed, was probably ultra small because he just knew everybody.
Very much.
Now you get through the academy, and I'm sure you had a little prep from your old man about the academy.
Oh, yeah. I was actually, it was funny. He had me practicing fingerprinting with him. He had an old board, and he goes, listen, you're going to do this in the academy. Learn it now. And he taught me how to fingerprint. And do you believe the day they started doing the fingerprinting in the classroom, who gets picked to go up and demonstrate it? Me. So I go, okay. So my teacher, okay, here, try doing it. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. I bang it out. He's like, who the hell are you? I'm like, all right, let me explain. I told him about my dad. He goes, sit down. And he grabbed somebody else who couldn't do it.
Back in the day, we used to have to do 3 cards. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Take the finger, roll,
Yep.
roll. Now they go digital.
Yeah.
And it's just all...
And eventually in there, you'd get some ink on your hand and,
Oh, yeah. Then it was there all day. Because no one told you it was on.
Exactly. You go out on the road and you see like a little black mark somewhere and you're looking all around.
That's the cop's version of a kick me sign.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yep. Yes,
Look
it
at the
is.
jackass. It's kind of like when you leave a scene with your lights on for 15 blocks.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I hated when we went to like the
LEDs?
LED lights because you couldn't hear them. The old rotating lights, you'd always know when they were on.
After a while, though, you'd hear the whoa, 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 whoa.
Or you're driving down the street and cars are just getting out of your way. You're like, hey, good to see you.
No, you know what you do? You hit the gas like you're going to a cause. And then as soon as you get out of sight, everybody, you just
You
shut up.
turn down a block and turn the lights off real quick.
See, I know the city cops and rural cops are a little bit different because there's been times I pulled out or I'm working midnights and I pull out of a street and I'm half asleep, and I pull out and I cut somebody off, flip on my lights and leave.
I've done that before.
It's one of the perks of being a
I've done it. I've actually gotten called out on it too by a friend of mine's wife. She goes, "You cut right in front of me." She goes, "Then you put your lights on." She goes, "I know you weren't going anywhere." She goes, "You just cut me off."
But stuff like that, when you're young, you think it's a big deal, but when you're older, it's a little bit of humor that sort of breaks up the monotony.
Oh, yeah.
Because police work on a daily basis, aside from the moments of horror, is very monotonous. It's like Groundhog Day.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, okay.
Well,
I'm gonna go out
patrol is repetitive.
Yeah.
Right.
They're different calls, but it's still calls for service.
Yep.
And it just becomes repetitive. As
Yep.
we
And
go.
we had to deal with that even more, in the early 90s when we had 3,000 homicides and 115,000 robberies.
Yeah, you got into when the city was bad.
Out of control.
Yeah.
Every night on the 4 to 12, it was someone was getting shot and killed. You were in a foot pursuit. You were in, it was just constant.
Well, that's when they did away with stop and frisk too, right?
No, that's when it actually kicked in.
Is that when it kicked in? Yeah.
When in 1994, when Bratton brought his dream team in and changed the city and changed policing and changed everything.
What'd you think of Bratton, by the way?
Oh, I thought his first time around, I loved him because he came in with the attitude of, enough of the BS. We have to change the city around. This is how we're doing it. And the team that he assembled, Louis Anamone, John Timoney, his dream team changed the entire city.
Well, the way policing was done, he was revolutionary.
Yeah, Jack Maples was the guy.
Because I've read his book, and as a matter of fact, you guys just had him on.
We had him on.
You had him on, yeah, which is super cool.
Yeah.
How did the day-to-day police work that you did? Were you still on patrol at that time?
Yes.
When he came,
Yep.
the day-to-day police work with the CompStat and stuff like that. How did that change the way you did business?
Well, you were a cop again. You were able to be a cop. Back when I first got on in 1990, it was still kind of, all right, hey, don't rock the boat. Don't do this. Don't do A and B because of just things that were going on in the city.
Be seen, not heard.
Right. And then he came in and basically said, hey, go do your job. And I've said it a number of times. There were so many reasons why it was effective. All right. One, he let the police do their job. He had City Hall backing him.
Yeah.
All right. And one of the most important things, which is the polar opposite of what's going on today, he had the DAs involved. And he had a strict agreement with the district attorney's office. If I'm going to allow my cops to go do their job, you damn well better keep these people in jail. Yeah. It's the only way this is going to work. It's the only way we're going to clean the city up is to keep the bad guys in. And then broken windows.
Well, who was the mayor at the time?
Giuliani.
Was Giuliani in there? Okay.
Giuliani brought Bratton back.
Yeah.
I thought I know he brought Carrick in, but I'm trying to think.
No, Giuliani brought in, Bratton was his first police commissioner.
Right.
Because Bratton was the chief of transit first, then left, went back to Boston for a couple of months.
And then went to L.A. from NYPD.
After NYPD.
It was the other guy, Kelly, too, right?
Well, then Kelly was
Kelly was
twice also.
after, yeah.
Yeah.
But so when you got that job and you got out on the road, you have this built up in your mind since you were a little kid of what a cop is, what police work is. Was it what you expected?
Oh, yeah. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I mean, I would do 4 to 12s and get into the precinct at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, really?
And get there and see the guy. But everyone did because everyone at that time loved the job. When I got, I blow people away with this. When we took the test in 1987, 85,000 people took the test.
Wow.
On just that one test. Now multiply that by, the 2 or 3 after that. So at that time, being an NYPD cop was it. So there was other guys who would get there that early, and you'd find out what happened on the day tour. Did anything go on? You took your time, kind of get dressed. You got something to eat, and then you went on the street.
And you sat around and bullshitted.
Yeah.
Because cops were friends back in the day.
Right.
Well, you can go to your precinct and sit there. You sit in the locker room and you just tell locker room stories for hours.
Well, that's the difference between firemen and cops. Firemen have dinner together after a call, after they're doing something, and that's how they decompress. And that's why there's less, and I want to stress less trauma in fire departments.
Less suicides also.
There's less suicides.
Right.
Yes, they're still
and that's
there.
why there's such a the NYPD, LA probably to a point, but having a partner in the NYPD is so different than other departments.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because that bond is forever. I mean, I literally, God's honest truth, still talk to my dad's partner.
Yeah.
All the time. I'm very good friends with Joe Hardiman's his name. Timmy Hardiman is still a very good friend of mine, his son. We grew up together. And Joe is still alive, thank God, and we still talk.
You know, it's funny. Everybody I've ever talked to from NYPD, their partner was either the best man at their wedding or their kid's godfather.
Well, look at it in terms like this. Like, you and I have never really had partners because our departments weren't big enough to have partners. You had people you worked with, and you call them your partner, but they're really not your partner. Well, think about our life now, Mike. Mike and I we're partners. He knows when I'm not able to talk. He knows when to jump in. Like, and that's the same symbiotic relationship.
We know when we're having bad days.
Yeah, yeah. Like, if I don't hear from him for a couple of days, I'll just send him a text. Hey, you okay? It's happened numerous times. I know when his shooting was, and he knows what mine is.
If I have another kid, Kevin's going to be the godfather.
I don't want to be a godfather. First of all, you're going to have one of those senior citizen kids. Because you're getting there, bro.
I am.
You're getting there.
55. 57, I mean.
How long did you stay in patrol?
Oh, I was only in uniform for 3 years, and then I went into anti-crime, which was a plainclothes unit in the precinct.
I wonder about that, too, because you have certain officers who stay in uniform for their entire career, and then you have others that matriculate rather quick. Why? And I know this happens in big departments, but I want to know why.
Why I did?
Why? No, why? Like, some just stay in uniform. Is it because they want to, or just have no drive?
They're comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, it's a comfort thing. You know what they're doing every day. This is what and a lot of them just like it. You know, I spent time on patrol with, when I first got to the precinct, there were guys on patrol for 20 years. You know, white shield, driving in their sector, doing their thing, and that was their thing. They loved it. They didn't want to take any tests. They didn't want to go to a detail. Whereas me, the only thing I ever wanted to be was a detective. You know, that was my goal, and getting there was the ultimate. So anything I did for that was the path I took. And I was busy. You know, I made a lot of collars on patrol, got in a shooting on patrol, bribery collars, all that. And the opening happened in anti-crime, which at the time was a fantastic unit. You know, you were plainclothes, driving around in a livery cab.
Yeah.
Small team. You did, off-hour tours. And Jimmy Mack, who I mentioned before, was my sergeant. So life was even better, with him there. But that was a great place to be.
I saw a livery cab in New York one time, and it had blue rims, and I said, that's a cop car right there. That's a cop car.
Were you married at the time?
When I first got on, no.
No.
I got married 2 years after I got on the job.
Are you, may I ask
Yes,
if
I am.
you're
33 years later. 31 years later. Sorry.
Okay, most prison sentences aren't that long. I just want to point that out. But the funny thing is because I have a theory. I have a working theory. If you were married, then became a cop, your rate of divorce is higher because the job changes you.
Yes.
Did I ever tell you I was married before I became a cop?
Thank you. Thank you. Because I've seen it. I've seen divorce happen in people who are married, then became cops because they just become different people versus, be a cop and then get married. Do you think that has any play?
Yeah, I do. Because it's a journey, and being a cop's wife is harder than being a cop.
True. 100%.
True. It is.
100%.
And, Ange was with me in 89. That's when we met. So I didn't get on until 90.
Did she have any family in law enforcement?
No.
No, so she
Nope.
went in blind.
Yep. And I remember when I got on, she had a big talk with my mom. My mom sat her down and went, here's how it works. Trust. He'll be okay. You have to trust his ability. You have to trust what he's doing, and he'll be okay. Anything goes on, give me a call. I mean, her and my mom were pretty tight. And my mom went through it for 26 years through the 60s and 70s.
At least she had somebody to lean on.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And my sisters and Angela are very tight, so they had her also. She had them also. But I think it was easier for her to us start off not on the job and then watching how excited I was to get to that point. And thank God, for her. And I don't say it just because I'm on a show and it's the right thing to say about your wife.
Otherwise, she'll divorce you.
Yeah,
That's all right.
Kiss ass.
I may get home and it might, but thankfully, because what she's done the last the 30 years I was on with situations I was in, and then getting into JTTF and going to 18 different countries around the world, and her being home with 3 kids by herself.
It's very important to have an understanding wife, or just an understanding partner, whether it be wife, husband, partner, whatever. It's very important that they understand what you're doing, what you're going through, what you see on a daily basis, when to talk to you, when not to talk to you.
But they become single parents.
Yeah.
They do.
Oh,
they become single parents.
absolutely.
My wife said that to me several times. I was a single parent.
Yeah.
And, afterwards, when I couldn't take care of myself, she was even more of a single parent. So having that rock and that stability at home is so essential to doing your job better.
Right. Oh, I was just going to say that makes your job better and easier because you're not thinking about that, because your kids are in a good spot.
I was going to say, everything's secure at home, so you can go and do your job.
Absolutely.
And then when you get back, everything's going to be status quo.
And we had an understanding. I made a promise to her to always give her a call when I could, to not leave her out there hanging if something came across the news, which did happen one night and scared the hell out of her. She knew I was working. She knew I was, doing a 4 to 12 one night, and it came over the news that a young cop got shot. And they had said on the radio and on the news that it happened in Manhattan North because he was at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. And Ange knew where that was because I ended up there a few times. So she knew it was in Manhattan North, but they weren't releasing the name of the cop. And I couldn't get to a phone because we were at the hospital. And what happened was the cop got shot in the 4-4. And they drove him across the bridge into Columbia Press because it was the closest hospital. And, we shot up to the hospital quick, so I wasn't able to get to her.
We didn't have cell phones back then.
Right. And she actually, to this day, she'll even say that was probably the most nervous she was in the 30 years I was working.
Because the wives all talk. I saw that with my thing. I didn't have my cell phone on me, and I was standing post waiting for this guy to come out for 2 hours. All the wives say, hey, there was a shooting in Roseland, and, is your husband working? Yeah, he's working. I can't get in touch with him. I can't reach his cell phone. And then at, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally get to a phone. It's not even my phone. She's getting a call from an unknown number. The anxiety that, I say that over and over again, that the people at home are really the unsung heroes.
Oh, yeah. And when I got in my shooting, during my shooting, one of our cops got shot. He got shot in the leg. He survived. But nevertheless, he was shot. We got to the hospital because we got taken there, for trauma reasons, because we had a shooting with 3 guys right after a supermarket robbery. And the first thing I did when I got to the hospital was grab our PBA delegate, find me a phone. And I called her from the emergency room. You're going to hear this on the radio because there was a cop shot. It's Ralph, who was at our wedding. So she even knew who Ralph was. He got shot. I'm fine. We're good. And all she needed to hear was my voice, and she was okay.
But see, it's weird. Like you said, you have to go to the hospital when you're involved in a shooting. Everybody says, see, I was a cop in a small town. It was 2 miles square, maybe. And everybody knows everybody's business. I was involved in a shooting at 2:27 in the morning, and I said, you know what? Someone's going to call and say, because they always tell you have to go to the hospital. They're going to call my ex-wife and say, there was a shooting, Mike's in the hospital.
Right.
Because you know how the grapevine is.
Yep.
7 minutes after my shooting, I called my ex-wife. I said, there was a shooting. I'm okay.
Yep. You have to, because, even back then without the social media aspect like it is today, the news was on.
Yeah.
And that's the first story on the news. So I just had to get ahead of that. And thankfully I did. And she was actually at work because it was about 1:13 in the afternoon. So I took care of that. So
I'm sure you had some hairy calls. Early on in your career, what do you think was the most hairy?
Oh, wow. We had, you know what? I'm going to try to remember. All right. There was one night that I've actually spoken about at colleges, and I've had that question. What was the craziest night? What was the craziest call? And I'm going to go through it quick. We always had a routine, me and my partner, to get something to eat at the beginning of the tour because you didn't know what the rest of the day was going to be. So we grabbed pizza. We're sitting on Riverside Drive. Narcotics starts chasing a guy around the corner, right to our car. We jump out, grab him, tackle him, take care of it. A couple hours later, 5 people get shot on 149 and Broadway in our command. We get to the scene, do what we have to do. A couple hours later, we get a call of a 7-day-old baby not breathing. We run up the stairs because the elevator's not working, obviously.
Of course.
We run up 7 flights of stairs. The mother meets us in the hallway and just hands us a lifeless baby. Grab the baby, take off, run down the stairs. I'm driving, doing 100 miles an hour up Riverside Drive while we're pumping the baby's chest. My partner's breathing in his mouth. I slide sideways into Columbia Press, and as we do that, the baby starts crying. So
Greatest sound in the world.
I was going to say, you hate when babies cry, but that's the greatest sound ever.
Greatest sound in the world. And then two hours later, the incident with the cop getting shot and killed happens.
Oh, my gosh.
That was one night.
Wow.
And you're supposed to go home and just say, okay, honey, I'm home. I'm going to bed.
That was one night. And when the cop got shot, Austin McDonald
Steve McDonald?
Sean McDonald from the 4-4.
Yeah, I remember Stephen McDonald.
Yeah.
He was the one that was paralyzed.
Yes, Sean McDonald was his name from the 4-4. Walked into a robbery. They shot him. They threw him in a car, took him to Columbia. And once that happens, you just shoot up to the hospital and start trying to block, roads off so they can get there. And we just happened to be in the bay of the emergency room and got to the car first. And actually, we took him out of the car, put him on the stretcher, and they took him in. So that was the end of that night. But that was one night.
That was exactly the same answer. Did you ever do any jobs with Mike Codella?
No.
I forget what precinct he worked out of, but he did a lot of undercover work. But early on, he was in Coney Island. That's right. He was in Coney Island. Most memorable call is Blue Baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can deal with it when it's somebody who's a little older. You can deal with it.
Did you have kids at that point?
No.
Yeah. Because when you have kids and you see the Blue Baby,
Yep.
your kid's face is right on that baby.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was, that was a tough one, because you try and you're driving, you're talking on the radio, and everyone that night did a phenomenal job shutting
down
Riverside
streets
Drive down, shutting the side streets down so we could get up there. And, you just don't crash. That was about it. Just get up there. And we did, and thankfully it worked out.
And that's such a special thing about law enforcement, too, because if you got to get somewhere, you have, like you said, you got a baby not breathing or anything, you put it out, cops are coming from everywhere. Block down roads, block down streets, do this, do that. And people don't see that. People want to badmouth cops.
Oh, yeah.
We go through a lot of shit to try to help people.
To be fair, some of it is our own fault that we get bad mouth.
Sometimes we shut down roads just for ha-has.
But you did a lot of, I read your resume. You've done a lot of different details. Any one of them that sticks out as your favorite?
Narcotics.
Why? What was the draw of that?
It was, the draw of it was the team I had. We had a very tight, close-knit team. We were friends. My partner on the team, I had met when I was in the 3-0 on patrol, and Carlos was a narcotics detective in Manhattan North. And we just clicked, started talking, became friends, and then I got in narcotics in the Bronx, and he had transferred to the Bronx. So we ended up on the same team. And he, to this day, is still a dear friend of mine. And Carlos taught me how to be a narcotics. He was so good. He was so good, and someone to look at, to go, all right, those are the cases I want to do. That's what I want to do.
You got to be a good actor in narcotics.
Oh, yeah. And you got to be hungry. You got to have an imagination. You got to shake the tree.
The drugs aren't going to come to you.
Right.
You got to go to the drugs.
The difference was back then you could.
Yeah.
Back then you had the ability and the freedom to shake the tree a little more than they can now. And that was a big advantage to us. But it was fun because my team all had the same kind. We hated doing B&B. We hated doing buy and bust. We wanted to do cases. So we just kept doing cases and doing cases. And Carlos had a memorable case, and at the end we got 121 kilos of coke.
Wow.
From
you mean 120?
100. A DEA case that we did jointly with them, a group of guys from Venezuela that we ran. And it was such a good case. But narcotics was a lot of fun. Those search warrants, I was the RAM guy, so it made it even more fun. And, we had the bet every search warrant. If I hit the door in one shot, I didn't pay for dinner.
Okay.
That was the deal. And
A lot of pressure.
It was, but
but it gave you incentive to open that door in the first shot.
Yep, and Carlos always got mad at me, and my team kind of got mad at me because the way I did it, I didn't hit the door and move to the side. I would hit the door, run through it.
But that's the most... So
drop the ram right there, and people are tripping over the ram.
Right. Well, it was good because we would always try to get, the layout of the apartment. So, like I said, we were very tight and very, knowledgeable of each other's abilities and what we were doing. So we would lay out the apartment, and I would always tell them, I'm going to hit it, and I'll turn into this room and let everyone go by.
But you get the layout of the apartment probably from like a CI.
Correct.
And they're not the most reputable people anyway.
But the greatest metaphor for life is being the first through the door.
Yeah.
Your first through the door is not the most dangerous. Second through the door is usually the most dangerous because then they wake up and figure out what's going on. Right? So first through the door sounds bad, but it's not as bad as you think.
That's why you went through first.
Right. But think about that as a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Your first one through the door, you're not going to catch the flack. Second one and third one, they're going to get it.
Yep.
So,
It's the rattlesnake theory. A rattlesnake doesn't bite. Yeah. Rattlesnake doesn't bite the first person. Rattlesnake gets pissed off at the first person. They bite the second person.
Right.
So if you're ever walking down where there's a rattlesnake, you say to I don't want to say your wife. You say to your friend, "I'll go first."
No, you tell your wife you're going to go for a walk in the woods and you wear sneakers, and she's going to say, "You can't outrun a bear." And I said, "I don't have to outrun a bear. I just got to outrun you."
That's right.
That's all you got to do.
When it comes to a bear, you got to outrun one person.
That's it. That's it. Especially when you trip them first.
But narcotics was great, and then a very close second was JTTF because it just.
So explain JTTF.
The Joint Terrorism Task Force is a FBI task force comprised of about 60 different police departments or agencies throughout the country. And it's New York.
Post 9/11?
Well, yes, because pre 9/11, there were only, I think, 11 detectives assigned to JTTF prior to 9/11. 9/11 happens, and the New York office just becomes this mammoth animal. We had the largest JTTF in the country. We were it. If New York wanted a case, we had it, regardless of where it was. We would find a connection in New York because New York was the number one target. So if it was a case that we wanted, we sometimes took it. We creatively talked our way into taking it. And that was a lot because of the Eastern District of the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was the strongest in the country. So if they wanted a case, it got to New York. And after 9/11, I got asked by a sergeant I used to work with to come down to the task force. And JTTF at the time was so a high-level detail, you didn't really put in for it because it was kind of unattainable. It wasn't a place you went, yeah, that's where I'm going, because no one went there. So to get asked to go there was a big deal. And Danny, my partner, Danny Murphy, got picked up at the same time. So I actually worked for him again in the task force. And that experience was second to none because of just the work we were doing.
And it was the most important thing in the country at the time.
At that point, right after 9/11, yeah.
Absolutely right.
Now 22 years later, I think it's fallen by the wayside, which is probably a big mistake.
Oh, yeah, because, terrorists, the one thing you learn, they don't have a timetable. They don't.
They're very patient.
Right. They don't care about time.
Yeah.
I went to Anniston, Alabama years ago on a weapons of mass destruction class. It was a federally funded thing. They said,
just come to my bathroom. You see mass destruction.
Mass destruction. Yeah. They said terrorists are very hard workers. They're very good actors, and they're very patient. Mm-hmm. They said what if they get a guy to work in every NFL stadium around the country right now? They're very hard workers and they're good actors. They're going to be working their way up the chain, working their way up. Then one day they're going to say, okay, on such and such date, when there's 32 teams, what if 16 NFL stadiums are full, we're going to release rice and anthrax in the stadium. They said there's nothing we could do about it. We just got to hope that we could stop it.
It's a great job making a battle plan for them. You want to write that one down?
Yeah, no kidding.
Just hand it to them.
They don't listen to this.
But you've seen so much in your career, and the stresses, they weigh on you after a time.
Yeah.
How did you deal with them? How did you cope with them? We all have our different coping mechanisms.
Yep. On patrol, I dealt with it a certain way, and it was great that I lived about an hour outside New York City.
I was just
Because
gonna
that
say
ride
the
home was
decompression
the
ride.
best ride home. You put the radio on. If it was nice out, you put the windows down. You calm down. Because back then, like I said, was nonstop for 8.5 hours. Every night was something.
Well,
so,
the shift went through like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Calls Holden and
Oh my God. It was, and then just the in progress ones and the chases and the fights, it was just constant. So that hour driving home was a big deal. And then I always had this thing that I watched TV for an hour, even when I got home. It didn't matter what time it was. And going back to being with Ange, she knew that. So she heard me come home. She knew I was going to put the TV on for about an hour. And that worked. And then other ways, the good thing, I think the advantage I had with not being stressed but not going down a really bad road was I never drank and I never smoked. So that was never an option. Like, I'm going to go home and have a drink, or I'm going to go out with the guys and go to a bar until 4 or 5 in the morning.
or how many of those guys on the ride home had drinks on the ride home?
Oh, God. You grabbed the 6-pack, you put it on the, your passenger seat and you drove home. And it was gone by the time they got home.
Road sodas.
Road soda, yeah.
You don't travel alone.
Right. So that was, I think, a big advantage of mine, not having that thought in my head. So I just dealt with it. But the difference today, and we've talked about this, Kev, the outlets today and the assistance programs that are out there today, thank God, are in place. No. Other than what it was when I got on.
You had your father. Did your father ever try to, prepare you for what you're going to see?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we would talk. I mean, we talked every day. We talked all the time. And that was a great outlet because he knew what I was talking about. He went through it, through Fort Apache, through, all that crazy time in the 70s. So he lived through it. So nothing surprised him of anything I was saying. And he always talk about it. Get it off. Don't keep it inside. So another great outlet with my wife was talking about it. I'd come home. Okay, we did this. Even if it was a quick, this is what happened tonight. We chased the guy across 3, rooftops, which she didn't love hearing, but it was a way to just get it out of me so it wasn't cooped up in me.
Well, it's a different mindset from what I'm used to because I didn't have that father who I could go talk to. So I kept it inside because I wanted to shield my wife. I always felt that she didn't sign up for it. I signed up for this. She didn't sign up for it. So I'm going to try to shield it from her. And, look what happened. It made me fall apart because I didn't have that outlet to do it. And if you can't go see a psychiatrist, you go see a psychiatrist, you're done.
Oh, you're done.
You're done. So,
Well, that's what I was going to say. Back in your day, they didn't really recognize mental health issues.
No,
You know what I mean?
you couldn't.
Yeah, you couldn't.
And that was
Exactly.
that was a taboo.
You would have never got on JTTF if you said that you were,
If you
feeling
were
a certain way.
back in the day, it was, and I hate to use that term back in the day, but it's true.
It is.
The explanation was it's the job, deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's what we were all told. Shut your mouth. So you're having a bad dream. Sorry. And just deal with it because God forbid, back in the early 90s, you mentioned you had any problem.
Yep.
And psych services, which was the mental health part of the NYPD, which was what it was. If you mentioned them at all, your career was done.
Yep.
Your gun was taken, your shield was taken, you were put
You were
on a
sitting on a
desk
desk.
out in motor transport in the middle of Queens doing midnights.
well, your era that you're talking about specifically right now, for those people who want to get a window into it, it's the one thing the movie Lethal Weapon got right. Do you remember the original
yeah.
one? The psychiatrist is always trying to, and he's got some serious psychological issues that he is dealing with, but he's not going to talk to her.
No,
Yeah.
because you're done.
You're done.
You're finished. And that was a big, big problem in the NYPD. So what happens when that happens? There's more alcoholism.
Yep.
There's more drug addiction. There's more other corruption problems that are going on because of the stress of home or whatever's going on in your life other than what's going on in the street. That was bad enough. But you didn't say a word, back then, and you just dealt with it. And, then later on in life, you wondered why, for X amount of years, you had terrifying nightmares,
And you couldn't tell anybody about it.
No,
You
absolutely
could
not.
maybe tell your wife. You
No.
can't tell anybody, or maybe your partner.
Right.
That was about it.
Maybe,
Yeah. Maybe.
you just, again, you were under that umbrella and thing of deal with it.
And I always said, it's a badge on my chest. It's not an S. I'm not Superman. We talk about it all the time on the show.
Yep.
We call it filling the glass. keep filling that glass with water. Sooner or later, that's going to spill over.
Absolutely.
You know, and
Most cops have it spill over at one time or another.
Oh yeah.
Without
In
doubt.
one way or another.
And the only way to get water out of that glass is to talk about it
Yes.
and to talk to someone.
Right. And that's why, like I said, today there's so many outlets, and we've met so many great people with the show. You know, Amanda,
I was just going to say
Angel,
that.
right?
Yep, absolutely.
You know, the work that's out there now with these outlets and support groups and organizations is so good for these cops on the street today.
And in Jersey here, we have cop to cop.
Well, cop to cop is what really did it for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know where else to turn. Like I saw it in the back of a magazine, you know, and I'm like, all right, let me give it a shot because otherwise I'm going to blow my brains out.
The great Dr. Stefanelli.
And great Dr. Stefanelli. There's, you know.
Saved my life.
So I've come across, and Amanda knows him quite well, a guy named Billy Mazer. Billy was a deputy chief of Atlantic City Police Department who is now the first responder liaison for Acadia Mental Health, who is so, like, and I talked to Billy a lot. I actually went to high school with him. So he loved what he did, but what he does now, it's so much more important to him. And that's not trying to take away from what he used to do. It's just his new purpose. Right. But you somehow, you know, and I know we're sort of just grazing over your 30-year career because in my opinion,
we only have an hour.
Yeah, but in my opinion, you were a cop and you were a great cop and you loved it and everything about your police life seems right on. Like the way you dealt with stress, you didn't drink, you didn't smoke, you tried to stay in shape, you spoke with your wife, you didn't divorce your wife. So right there, you're in the top 10%. But for some reason, or like we talked about it on Instagram Live, there's a beginning and an end to everything. So your career is winding down. You know, and it's not that you didn't love it, but what made you hang it up?
Like I said, I never dreamed about being there for 30 years. And then where I was in JTTF and what was going on with a certain agency, you know, got to be too much. And being in JTTF for 17 years, which was way over what most of us or most guys ever did in that unit. I think there were 3 of us with that amount of time, 3 or 4 of us with that amount of time in that unit. And it got to a point where enough of the fights, enough of the arguments, enough of just the disagreements of how to do a case and what a case should be done, you know, how it should be done. And it was just, you know, enough was enough. And it was time, and 30 was a nice round number. And that was it. But it was...
you put those papers in, and it's permanent.
It's permanent.
It's tough.
Yep. Yeah. You know, and then I'm still young. You know, I'm only 55, but I retired 3 years ago. So I'm
still the oldest one in the room.
Of course. I design it that way every week. Do you understand that?
That's what you told me about.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes, that's right. The only person, we've only had one person in here older than him, and he served in World War II. That was it.
And we went to high school together.
Yeah.
How about like political red tape? Did that have anything to do with it too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
exactly.
Speaking of him, his name's Bob Gibson. By the time this show airs, he will have turned 100. Him and I have the same birthday. He will have turned 100. I want to say happy birthday, Bob. He served D-Day, Battle of the Bulge. Yeah. Calls me all the time.
Stole a Mercedes, stole a BMW.
He's got girlfriends on every corner. I mean, he's really a national treasure.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Those are treasures.
Yeah. So,
but the political part of it played a big role in it.
That's a big thing. That's the most disheartening thing to a cop.
Yep.
You know, you're trying to do the right thing, but you got to fight that political red
Absolutely.
tape, and it's disgusting.
So 2020, you're not very popular. But, you know, the funny thing is you've seen attitudes towards police change so much over your career where you were able to shake the tree. Now, I go into Times Square or something, people are walking down the street with joints and the cops are just standing there and they're walking right past them. And, God, what a different world. 30 years has changed so much in police work. And I think it'll rubber band back. Don't get me wrong. I think
so, too.
I think it's necessity.
I don't think it'll ever get back to right after 9/11, though. Do you remember the love for cops right after 9/11?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people were just stopping and thanking you for being a cop and everything else, and now they're spitting on cops and everything. It's disgusting.
Yep, I think I agree with you, Kev. It's going to change because it usually does, you know. And I think this.
Well, you look at the Dinkins days. You were not cops were not popular.
Nope.
And then you had the Giuliani days. Cops were popular again after 9/11, all time, and then it just started sliding.
Right, exactly. And you know, Mike, you just mentioned the political ball game, and that's what it is. The worst thing, and I've said it for a long time, if there's one occupation in our country that politics should have nothing to do with, it's law enforcement.
Exactly.
Because once that happens, the safety of the officers change.
Yep.
You know, the political view changes the way cops work, the way they try to protect themselves, because they don't protect themselves anymore. You know, they just hold on for dear life till someone comes and helps them. You know, there's nothing wrong with defending yourself. You know, we were told in the academy back in 1990, you're forbidden to lose a fight. You're not allowed to lose. And you do everything you can to win a fight. And if you bring that today, there's nothing wrong with that. Cops are allowed to defend themselves. And you watch these videos that are out there, and that's when I get so mad.
Yeah.
And I go crazy watching these videos of cops not defending themselves.
Well,
You know,
I used to love that. You go to arrest somebody. You're nothing without that. Take off that badge and gun, and you're. No, I don't do that. I'm sorry.
No. Right.
I don't fight fair.
No.
I have a radio to call other guys that are going to.
I have a
fight you
garbage.
also.
I have a garbage can right near me.
Yeah.
Cops don't fight fair.
No.
Like you said, we're in the only business where you can't lose.
Right.
You lose, someone's dying.
You're not allowed.
You're not allowed to lose.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
dying.
So after you end your career, you after 30 years wanting to do this your whole life, you have to be lost.
It was it's weird, you know, and the way I described it, it's like walking forwards for 30 years and then someone telling you got to walk backwards. You could do it, but it's going to take a while until you get the rhythm of walking backwards. And that's what it was like. You know, it was a lot of, what am I going to do? And thankfully I have the greatest family in the world. And, you know, I can say that my 3 kids and Andrew are the best in the world. Had my back. We'll be good. What do you want to do?
I speak with a lot of cops who are retiring, and they go through the same changes, and they say, like, well, what am I going to do? My answer is always the same to them. Anything you want.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
You want to start a podcast, go start a podcast. You want to work at Home Depot, go work at Home Depot. You want to be a Walmart greeter, go ahead. You can do anything you want, and you have security if you did it right. And then, like, see, you're along the same lines as us. Like, I ask Mike all the time, why the hell did we start a podcast? Like, we have no idea. You started Gold Shield Show. Like, why?
Right.
Why? But you find something in it. I'm sure that's why it happened.
Oh, that's exactly why it happened. Danny and I were very good friends. You know, he was my sergeant. We had met in 90, I think it was 99. He was my sergeant in the gang unit in the Bronx. I was already there. Danny got assigned there after he was a detective, got promoted, spent some time in the 4-6, and then went to the gang unit. And actually, our first day was hysterical. The way we met and what happened. And I just told my daughter this story last night because she actually asked, how did I meet Danny? And my partner and I were key on this one gang member. He was the head of the Nietas. His name was Santana. He was our, like, pain in the ass. We wanted him.
Thorn in the side of the
we
department.
couldn't get him. We couldn't get people to talk about him. It was, but he was our guy. And one day it broke, and we got someone to give him up. They gave up his apartment with guns and drugs and scales and name it was in this apartment. So we get a search warrant. And I walk into work one day, and Danny's standing in the office. And I kind of look at him like, all right, who's this guy?
Who's the new guy?
Hey, Danny Murphy, how are you? I'm like, great, let's go. He goes, what are we doing? We're doing a search warrant. Let's go. Okay. We've known each other 35 seconds, and he's in our car driving to a warrant, has no idea what we're doing, what it's about. We're trying to brief him on the way there. ESU ends up hitting the apartment, getting all the stuff out of there, but Santana's not there. So now we have this press conference down in 1PP with all the stuff we found, Santana's picture, his cousin's picture, and the inspector going, all right, now you got to go get him. So that was Danny's introduction to me. And we ended up getting him like 2 days later. We got him to turn himself in. But
He didn't flee the country?
no, he was running around Jersey, near Hackensack.
Yeah,
And
all
then-
this shit comes to New Jersey.
and then we ended up getting in touch with him and talked to him on the phone. He ended up turning himself in. And then Danny and I always were friends. He was my sergeant again in JTTF, and we just were always friends.
Yeah, but at some point he had to approach you and say, "Hey, let's start a show."
No, actually, I did, but don't tell Danny. We were talking one day, and it was on the phone this past December, and I just said, hey, and the original idea was just to have him do it and call it Murphy's Law, something like that.
Perfect.
And he
name.
goes, no, we'll both do it. And I thought, all right, what are we going to do? Are we going to be just the two guys talking about what we did? We don't want to do that. So we actually did a lot of research. We listened to a lot of shows, all right, we don't want to do that. Let's do this. And we came up with the idea of there's so much bad stuff going on in law enforcement today in the view of police officers. Let's highlight great work that no one knows about.
Yeah.
And one of our
the news certainly doesn't do
right,
that.
exactly. And one of our big catchphrases is a backstage pass to these big high profile cases. Everyone sees a bad guy get put into a car and taken down to court, but no one knows that cop didn't sleep for 3 days, he's seen his family in a week, chased this guy in 3 different states. No one knows that. So what we did is instead of just the kind of common true crime category, what we did was get the men and women who actually did these cases themselves, get the firsthand account of what happened, and highlight our guests and let them just tell the story of that case. And we thought about, we're like, all right, that'll work. And it just kept rolling, and one after another, and better. And then, it kind of splintered a little bit, that we got so drawn into the mental health part of the job, and how important that is. Because, our first couple of guests, we kept kind of hearing the same thing. I went through this, I went through that. So we kind of have a 2-prong approach to the show. The high-profile true crime, firsthand backstage pass, and the mental health issue. And that's when Irish Angel, The Wounded Blue, all these guys we started really talking to and getting what they're doing out there, the Suffering Podcast, and what they're doing.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
And
But it's working.
oh, it's great, and we couldn't be happier.
So much fun, isn't it?
Oh my God, we have a blast.
But you know what it is, though? It's hearing those stories. You take on those stories, right? And you take on their pain.
Yeah.
We were saying the ride home. We leave here, I mean, Kevin and I hear a lot of dark stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's that ride home where you just,
Yeah. Yep.
you got to decompress.
Sometimes we'll call each other on the way home.
On the way
go,
home.
What the fuck did we just listen to? Like what? Because it's so just horrible. It did that with Amanda. Like,
Yeah.
geez,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Yep.
If you listen to Amanda's episode, like I said, we had to break it up into 2 parts because every time we went through like her suffering, because what we do is, as you know, we bring them down and then we bring them back up. So just when she went through her suffering, we thought we were going to bring her back up and
just
bring up
keeps
another story.
It just
Yeah.
keeps coming
It
down.
just kept going down and down.
It's like, all right, I'm tired of hitting my head on these ledges down there. It just kept going down.
And then the thing about her is she'll tell you all those down stories with a smile on her face.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's who she is.
Just be the victim or the victor.
Yep.
That's her big thing.
Yep.
Yeah,
And,
And she's definitely the victor. I'll tell you that.
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah,
she's
so
great.
What's so where can we find Gold Shield Show? Throw out some plugs for us.
Gold Shields we have it on every podcast platform, every audio you can think of, thankfully. It's all out there. And then we just started our YouTube channel, Gold Shields channel on YouTube.
Good luck dealing with YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And we've heard that. We're just going to take it. We're going to tell the truth. We're going to get these stories out there. And what they do, they do. We're not going to, stop the stories that are out there because we're getting some amazing stories. And like you just said, Mike, Danny and I become fans. We hear these stories, like we'll know about the story, we'll know about the case. But then once you start hearing things that you've never heard of, and you sit there and there's times that Danny and I, oh crap, we got to talk.
Yeah.
Because you're getting so into the show. And I'll realize it more when I listen to the show back.
Yeah.
Well, that was the difference when we went from audio to video. I could listen to these stories, and if I get drawn in like that, I just sit there and with a blank look on my face. Oh, yeah, I got to talk.
Right.
And I can go cut that out.
Right.
But I can't do that anymore with video, so I have to keep going.
Yep.
But like you said, you become a fan of these people after a while.
You do.
Like Josh Radell.
Yeah, Josh is great.
guy was shot in the head.
Yeah.
You know, and he's still here today to talk about it.
Yep.
And
I mean,
talks about his half-shaved ball when he was going to the hospital. That was his big concern, getting shot in the head. That when he took off, he was going to see because he manscaped that day and didn't do the rest.
No, he manscaped, and his
you
wife
told me that story.
his wife saw him, and she's like, "Well, what are you doing that for?" So he stopped. He gets shot that night on the way to the hospital. He just got shot in the head. He's thinking about, "Oh my God, they're gonna strip me naked and see my half-shaved balls."
Right. Well, we had a guest, Kimber Guest, who is a sergeant down in Berkeley County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina, who got shot 8 times.
Oh, I saw that one. Yes, I know. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Unbelievable. And that show, you would think would be heartbreaking, and she cracked us up talking about that, between throwing up her cheesy fries, after getting shot, and being pissed off that she got shot. I mean, if anyone can encapsulate strength, it was Kimber.
Well, what about like Billy Bart?
Yeah,
Billy Bart was a fireman at FDNY, came down with cancer, and he goes,
from 9/11.
He goes, I'm lucky I got cancer.
Yeah.
He goes, because I got such great treatment and everything. And me and Kevin are sitting there, you're lucky you got cancer.
He wishes,
bright outlook.
He wishes everybody had his cancer experience.
Yeah,
that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
But, Tom, listen, we're coming to the end of this show, and I always end the show with the same way, because you've done 30 years. You've seen an enormous amount of stuff throughout your career, and you've seen an enormous amount of suffering, not only the stuff that you endured, but others endured. What do you think it's taught you?
Compassion. You hear these stories and you think back in your career, and the show did a lot of this, and Danny and I'll talk offline, and I mean, we talk 2 or 3 times a day. You forget what you gone through in 30 years. You always hear, you forget more than you remember, but then you hear these stories of what people have gone through.
You're like, I'm not so bad.
Right. Yeah. And the heartfelt, that we feel when we're doing the show, but compassion and understanding, and the strength and faith, and believing in where you came from and where you're going to go is a big part of it. And that's definitely has come back even more once we started doing the show.
And you can relate to it.
Oh,
you can
absolutely.
relate to the guests.
Because any of us, we've said it on the show, any of us, between Kimber, Tanya Owen losing her husband, any of us could have went through that in a millisecond.
Yep.
And thankfully, we didn't, on our end. The shooting I was in, Ralph got shot. He was okay, thank God. So you just relate and you put yourself in those spots, and I think that's what we've realized.
Well, you have a new outlet in order to heal, because that's what your retirement's supposed to be. It's supposed to be healing from all the wounds that you incurred during your career, and that's what I know the show does for us. It heals a lot of stuff. Sometimes there's a little some damage in here, but I wish you nothing but success, and I can't wait to see you keep growing and growing and growing. And don't forget about the humble guys here at the Suffering Podcast.
Oh, no. When you guys are getting like 1 million downloads a week,
Yeah. From your mouth to God's ears.
Remember the little guys on the way up, because you're going to meet the same guys on the way down.
You know what? It's a great ride, and we just, we understand who we are. We're 2 NYPD detectives having fun, but I love the people we've met. You guys, not just saying it because I'm here. I'm not. I truly mean it. Me and you. The first time we talk, it was like we knew each other for 20 years, and other people that we've gotten to meet, and we say it to them all, one thing in the NYPD, once we get kind of our claws in you, you don't get rid of us.
Yeah.
Well, we tell everybody, once you come on here, you're family.
You're it.
You're family. I mean, we have such a huge family now.
I speak to, I'm going to say 90% of the guests. 90%. And the other ones that I don't speak to, it's not because I hate them. It's just because, we don't, I even get, I get weird messages. Let's put it that way. I get real weird messages.
But we say it all the time. My list, my contact list, and holidays, texts, to people who are on the show. It's a different level, and that's what our job is, though. I think that's just in us to be that way.
Probably.
You know what it is, too? The connections we have now.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for this show, we wouldn't have connections. If someone has a problem, they could call us,
right,
and we may not be able to help them, but we could refer them to someone that could help them. You know, like we brought up Amanda Coleman a million times tonight.
So do you
she could help anybody.
Do you know how many people that through Amanda that we've been able to get into treatment? And it's the most wonderful feeling in the world. And it's all it is trading one life of service for another life of service.
Absolutely.
Tom, thank you so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure meeting you, brother.
It was my pleasure. Yeah, this was great.
We could have went on all night.
All night, but thank you very much.
I'm sure after the show's over, we're going to stand around for another hour and bullshit and tell stories.
Which is all good. We do the same thing. Thank you again, though.
And that's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Gold Shields with Tom Smith. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Dark days make the sun shine brighter. Mike's episode 9 cup. Everybody just wants to do their job. Strength at home makes your job better. A new beginning can only happen when something ends, but most importantly, compassion. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Clapper, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram.
Fans only.
That's yours. You show your feet. Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And, of course, follow The Suffering Podcast. Like and subscribe. Please comment. We do read all the comments, and we will see you on the next episode.